When it comes to compression in mastering conditions, usually it's just the glue. So it's the final dynamic processing that tends to kind of like stabilize the sound. So it will glue the mix together. I'm going to try to demonstrate this on more than one compressor. And I'm also going to try to demonstrate more than one thing, being added with compression during mastering. So I'm going to use the basic of the compressors, the one from Ableton right there. And the thing I want to do for the most part with this one, I want to leave it in RMS mode. This means that it will react to the RMS values of the signal. Root mean square, meaning to the average values of the signal. It will not react as fast as it would if I made it a peak mode compressor. Okay, so leave it in RMS. I'm going to put the ratio all the way up to infinite to 1, meaning it's kind of a limiter. But I'm doing that so I can hear the compression happening. Okay, as well, I'm going to pull the attack up, let's say to somewhere around 10 milliseconds. Let's try that out. Let's try the release at like somewhere around 60. Doesn't matter now. What I'll do, I'll play the song and I'll pull the threshold down until it starts punching down on it, but not just a tiny bit. So I really want to hear that timing happening, okay? Okay, now we can hear that dynamics change. Now I'm going to pull up on the volume a bit and compensate. So let's try to disable this. Without it. With it. So you can hear that compression happening, all the sucking and the pumping of the compressor. And I don't really like that. That's not the result I want to impart on this song. So let's play around with the release and the attack settings. So let's try it out. Now the makeup gain is the amount of gain we're applying after the compression. So I want to somewhat compensate for the attenuation the compressor is applying. You see, like this, it really feels punchy. So that attack of 10 milliseconds is just letting some of the transients go through. It does feel more punchy. Of course, this is way too much compression. If I play it again, you will see that the amount of gain reduction we're applying is about -4, -3. Now, in most cases, that's not something we want. So I'm just going to pull back on the ratio. And I'm going to pull down on the makeup gain. Of course, we're not applying that much compression anymore. So let's try it with and without. That's without. That's with. That's great. That's the exact kind of control I want. So just a tiny bit of accentuation on the transients and the control of everything that comes after. So the sustain, and with the release, I'm controlling that pumping feeling. I want that gone, and I also want to control everything after the transient happens. Now the values for attack and release are going to change dependent on the song, on the input material. Mostly the attack is gonna depend on the kind of transients we have in the song, and the release is going to depend most of all on the BPMs, on the speed of the song, and the amount of transient stuff that's happening and how often it happens. So experimenting with the attack and release while having the ratio really high at like infinite to 1 is a great way to hear what the compressor is doing to an extreme, and just pulling off on the ratio and getting the amount of compression you want. And usually for the master, 1 to 2 dBs for me is enough just to feel that control. Now I'm using the RMS version of it because I want that reaction of the compressor. I want the reaction to be smooth. And the smoothness of that reaction translates into a more transparent compression. And especially for the master, that's something I would want. Now, there's another thing I could do with a compressor to a song like this, to electronic song. I could do something like, like newer compression, kind of a parallel kind of compression where I would exaggerate what the compression is doing, but then just add a tiny bit of that into the dry signal. Now, this has enough of transients and everything. This song is quite punchy. So I could try something like this. So lower the attack completely. And let's try the peak reaction so that it would actually catch those peaks. So I want to squash the song. Let's hear that squash, the way it's going to sound with. This is already distorting. No, less of the... Something like this. Not so much distortion being applied. Of course, the threshold doesn't even need to be so low. See, we're really squashing the song, so if you just want to hear what that sounds like compared to normal, let me compare those. So it does sound much louder. Of course, we're taking away a lot of the transients. See, that's like just cutting off almost all the transients. Okay, that's okay. Now, I don't have to do it so much, so the ratio can go dial down. That's still a lot. You see, that's still a lot. Now, what I can do is actually, into the dry signal, I can add some of that really super compressed. Say 20%. You see, we actually retain all the transients, we retain all that attack, we just add a tiny bit of that super squash signal, and thus we lower the level of the low level information. So everything that was quiet now is pushed in a tiny bit, kind of like adding some saturation as well, but just this works with the attack and release in mind. So we could do something else and, maybe let some of the transient through and push that in. So let me show you this. So completely wet. Set up the compressor as such. You see, to actually accentuate some of the transients too, and also squash the rest of it, like a really hard compression like this. Let's compare those. Without it, with it. Okay, now that we have it set, don't have to apply so much makeup gain. That's just ever so slightly adding that low level information, plus adding also some of the punch. So we're making an extreme version of the compression, adding that into the original. It could be anything. It could be anything you want to accentuate. If you wanted to accentuate some of the punch and add that in, you could do that. If you wanted to accentuate all the low level information as I did the first time with the attack all the way down, so squashing all the transients and add all of that in as well, you could do that. It all depends on the incoming signal. It all depends on the song that you're actually working on. So there is no quick solution for everything. There really isn't. There might be a setting for a compressor as a preset that's going to sound good on most of the stuff, but it's not going to sound good on everything. So instead of relying on a setting that sounds good on most of the things, on like majority of everything, it's better if you actually learn how to set up a compressor, to listen for that dynamic workings of the compressor, to listen to that attenuation happening, how it sucks and pumps and how it feels on the signal, with a high ratio setting, move it down and add that into your signal by parallel or by applying it. By learning how to do that, of course, you will have more mastery and more control over your masters. So just practice, practice, practice. Now let's try another compressor. Let's try something else. Try some of the plugins. And I really like this Amec one, mastering compressor, that doesn't really have the time settings, but it has the timing, and it is in milliseconds. So mostly this listens to the RMS of the signal, but you could include some of the peak, signal into the detection circuit and some of the faster, behaving signal. So basically this is feeding the detection circuit with 3 different types of signals. And we don't have the actual attack and release kind of setting, but for most part, you can hear what it behaves like if we were to just disable the clipping, and I'm going to push up the ratio all the way up. Now let's try the way this sounds. I'm going to pull up the headroom as well. So lower the headroom until we get some compression. And since we have a really high ratio, it's going to be extreme. So let's try different timings. This is really fast. This sounds really nice. So I just want less of this. I'm gonna lower the ratio and up the headroom a tiny bit so that it's only touching, it's only touching the song really ever so slightly, just like this. You can bypass that. Now, I know this is a really, really slight difference, but this tiny bit of control that the compressor induces is just, in my ears, in my brain, the way I practice to hear it, is just not letting it sound all loosey-goosey and everywhere. It just kind of tightens it up. That's it. Just controls the entire song, and it feels like the sound is more stable. That's all I can hear from here. And if you actually wanted to add some of that peak compression, let me show you what that sounds like. Let me up the ratio again. So you see, if I added some of the fastest kind of, signal detection there, and now you see it's reacting. Now that's just squashing the transients. Now we could make it just touch the transients sometimes. Just like that. So it doesn't go too much into our limiter or whatnot. We could do that with a clipper as well, of course, but I'm just gonna pull off that ratio just like this. I have to up this a tiny bit more because I'm not compressing so hard. Yeah, you see that? Just gonna touch it a couple of times. Yeah, only the extremes. Without it. I should pull up a little bit more on the headroom. Not on the headroom, sorry. I should pull up a tiny bit more on the makeup gain. Like this. So that's nothing, bypassed. So whatever kind of compression you find, something that mostly detects like the RMS kind of signal is better, like this Amec mastering compressor or like the basic one from Ableton that has it. There are quite a few more, like the Kotelnikov. I like this one a lot. You can get the free version of this. I can even show you the free version of that. So you can grab a free version of this compressor. It really is really good. It has two detection circuits, of course, for the peak and for the RMS, and you can set separate release times for those two. That means that it has kind of a double release. The first one goes fast up to a certain point, and then it slowly releases all the way up. Okay, so it's slowly releasing that attenuation from happening. And it's really transparent in the way it does it. So this is also a really nice compressor to try out. And I would exactly do the same thing with it. So push the ratio all the way up. Without it, honestly, it's also a good choice. I feel like I need to spend more time just setting it up, but really what you're searching for finally in a compressor for mastering usually is that tiny bit of control, that just stabilization of the signal is what you seek for happening most of the times. Not always. There are always special cases where you can't get the mix much better from the mixing engineer, and maybe there's no other chance. Maybe they don't have the mix anymore. Maybe this is just a remastering of a really old mix down, and you don't have a chance of, mixing it again. So you do have to do some special processing to try to resolve any kind of, mishaps in the mixing that you can. But as for the normal kind of mastering, routine, usually the compression is going to be serving that purpose of just stabilization. And it doesn't have to be applied always, only when it's actually necessary. So test it out, try it out. If it doesn't feel like you need the compression there, like it's not adding anything beneficial, well, just don't use it. Try to recognize the problem and try all the solutions, technical solutions to solving that problem. Choose the best one. That's how you need to proceed.